If you cracked open these sources today, expecting, I don't know, a breezy adventure with second breakfasts and riddles in the dark, and this uplifting return to the Shire, you should probably just close the book immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. You are stepping into, well, a cosmic slaughterhouse, essentially.
Right. It is the absolute antithesis of a comfortable fantasy.
Yep.
I mean, what we have on the table today is the definition of a living, breathing, just inescapable doom. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here. And yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. This is heavy.
It really is. Our mission for you today is to take you through this incredibly dense, highly emotional excavation of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Children of Húrin. Specifically, we're looking at the excerpts that were meticulously edited by his son, Christopher Tolkien.
Right, and we have a pretty formidable stack of source material to guide you through this. We're looking really closely at Christopher Tolkien's preface, the introduction that details the geographical history of Beleriand, the first 2 chapters of the tale itself, and a crucial pronunciation guide.
Oh my gosh, a guy that just saved me from immense embarrassment, by the way.
Oh, the C thing.
Yes. Pro tip, for anyone navigating the linguistic architecture of the elder days, the letter C always makes a hard K sound, always. So it is Celebros, not Celebros.
Yeah, which is a very easy trap to fall into.
I would have butchered that for the next hour if Christopher Tolkien hadn't put that safety net in there. But let's bypass the linguistics and just jump straight into the geography, because we are operating on a timeline of staggering depth here.
We really are. We are roughly 6,500 years before the Council of Elrond, so deep, deep in the First Age. And our setting is Beleriand, which is this vast continent west of the Blue Mountains.
But it's not just a setting, right? I mean, to understand the events that unfold here, you have to understand the geography of loss.
Precisely. The continent of Beleriand is doomed. It's a landscape that's destined to be violently drowned by the Great Sea in these apocalyptic tumults at the very end of the First Age.
So we are literally reading about a world that is fundamentally, permanently lost to the waters of time.
Exactly. And Christopher Tolkien, in his preface, he wanted to present this as a continuous, standalone narrative. He stripped away the heavy editorial presence so you can just, experience this raw story of a doomed family living on a landmass that is itself on death row.
Yeah, such a striking way to put it, on death row. And the physical landscape, it absorbs the emotional weight of the narrative. There's that haunting passage in the introduction referencing Treebeard.
Oh, right, from the Two Towers.
Yeah. When he's walking through Fangor much, much later in history, he sings this song, remembering the ancient forests of Beleriand. He talks about walking in the willow meads of Tazarinen in the spring, the elm woods of Osirian in the summer, and then he just drops that chilling line.
And now all those lands lie under the wave?
Yes. It gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
It forces this fascinating question about memory and the physical earth.
Well, Treebeard is described as "ent the earthborn, old as mountains." His memory is the memory of the soil itself.
Right, he's like a walking, talking geological record.
Yeah. Exactly. And when Elrond reflects on this era, much later during the Council of Rivendell, he sighs and remembers the glory of the elder days, but he specifically notes that he has seen many defeats and many fruitless victories.
Fruitless victories. Let's pause on that phrase for a second, because I think that's the core of it. You can win the battle, you can hold the line, but the war is fundamentally lost on a spiritual level.
It's an unwinnable situation.
Right. And it makes me wonder about the drowning of Beleriand. Is that deluge just collateral damage from a war of the gods, or is it like a necessary baptism?
A baptism, how so?
Like, does the landscape itself literally have to be wiped away and cleansed by the ocean because the spiritual rot that occurs here is simply too deep to build on?
That is a fascinating way to look at it. The earth itself absorbs the trauma, and to understand the sheer density of that trauma, we have to look at the source of that spiritual rot. We have to introduce the ultimate architect of this misery, Morgoth, formerly Melkor, the original Dark Lord. And for those keeping track, the master of Sauron. Sauron was just his lieutenant.
Just a middle manager of evil compared to this guy. And the source describes Morgoth not as some ethereal, floating evil spirit, but as physically incarnate. He is massive.
Right. He's fully bound to a physical form. He wears this heavy iron crown, and he rules from the underground fortress of Angband beneath the artificial mountains of Thangorodrim.
Which he built himself, right?
Yes, from the slag and ash of his subterranean forges. There is this black reek, a toxic smoke that pours out of those peaks and stains the northern sky.
It's a permanent visible degradation of the atmosphere. But I mean, A polluting volcano is one thing. It's his curse that really sets the machinery of this tragedy in motion.
The curse is the engine of the entire narrative. But, and this is crucial, we need to completely discard any preconceived notions of what a curse actually is.
Like, it's not a fairy tale hex.
No, not at all. In folklore, a curse is an invocation. A witch speaks a spell, calling upon some higher cosmic power or dark magic to trigger a specific outcome. You know, prick your finger, fall asleep.
Right, but Morgoth isn't invoking a higher power.
Because he believes he is the highest power.
Ah, right. It's his sheer arrogance.
Precisely. The source text makes it extremely clear that Morgoth's curse is not a spell. It is the overwhelming force of his own gigantic, localized will. Because Húrin dares to defy him, Morgoth tells him, and this is a quote, "Upon all whom you love, my thought shall weigh as a cloud of doom, and it shall bring them down into darkness and despair."
It's terrifying. He literally forces Húrin to sit immovably on a high place of Thangorodrim and see the world through his eyes, through a lens of bottomless malice.
He binds him to a stone chair and says, basically, you're going to watch what I do to your family.
I want to try and visualize what that actually means mechanically, because it's not like he's just making bad things happen via remote control. Think of Morgoth's will as like a localized gravitational field that bends the light of reality.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Like, imagine someone puts on VR goggles that only show them the worst possible outcome of every situation. Every time Húrin looks at his family, the light of their actions, their hopes, their conversations, their choices is warped and distorted by this immense gravitational pull of malice before it even reaches Húrin's eyes.
So he sees the truth, but stripped of all hope.
Exactly. He is receiving a compellingly credible picture of events, but one completely stripped of all grace.
That gravitational analogy holds up beautifully when you consider Morgoth's own psychological and physical state, because for all this immense power, he is fundamentally characterized by cowardice and physical limitation.
Which seems counterintuitive for a dark god.
It does, but as he pours his malice out into the orcs, the dragons, the spells of deceit, he is actively dispersing his native power. The text explicitly tells us he becomes ever more earthbound, unwilling to issue from his dark strongholds.
He is literally trapping himself in a heavy physical body by his own cruelty. His godhood is diluted by his obsessive need to control the physical board.
Exactly, and there is that brutal, humiliating detail about the elven High King Fingolfin riding alone to the gates of Angband to challenge Morgoth to single combat.
Oh, that scene is just incredible. Fingolfin is screaming at the gates, calling him a coward king, a den dweller, a wielder of thralls.
And Morgoth only comes out because he's too embarrassed in front of his own captains to refuse. He is literally peer-pressured into fighting.
The sensory details of that combat reveal everything about Morgoth's degraded state, too. He fights with this massive hammer, Gron, and every time he swings and misses Fingolfin, he strikes the ground, gouging these massive craters.
Right, and he eventually beats Fingolfin down, mostly just through sheer attrition, but with his dying breath, Fingolfin pins Morgoth's foot to the earth with his sword.
The text describes this black blood gushing forth, filling the pits of Grond, and from that day on, the Dark Lord permanently walks with a limp.
A limp he can never heal.
Right. A god who bleeds black blood into the craters he dug himself, permanently limping. And he also bears the facial scars from Thorondor the Eagle and the humiliation of Lúthien's magic, which literally knocked his iron crown off his head so it rolled across the floor of his own throne room.
He is incredibly powerful, yes. But he is deeply battered, insanely insecure, and physically bound to the earth.
Which really pushes me to challenge a core concept here: fate. Túrin later names himself Turambar, which means master of fate. But if Morgoth is just orchestrating their doom by manipulating events and warping perceptions through his disposed will, does fate even exist here?
That's a huge question.
Right. Or are we just watching a rigged game played by an immensely powerful but terrified bully?
You are hitting on the central philosophical tension of the entire legendarium. Is Túrin making his own tragic choices, or is the atmospheric pressure of Morgoth's will so heavy that failure is just statistically inevitable?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the source text contains a really crucial detail. Morgoth actually fears that Túrin would grow to such a power that the curse that he had laid upon him would become void.
Wait, really? He thinks the curse could fail?
Yes. This implies the curse is not absolute preordained fate. It is an oppressive, active malice, sure, but one that can theoretically be outgrown or broken if the individual possesses enough sheer strength of will to escape its gravity.
Wow. But the tragedy is that the gravity is just too crushing for a mortal frame to withstand.
Exactly.
So against this backdrop of a bleeding, malicious god, we zoom in on the fragile lives caught in the crossfire, the humans of the House of Hador. And to understand their vulnerability, we really have to examine their relationship with the elves.
Let's analyze the childhood of Shirin and his younger brother, Hur. As youths, they are ambushed by orcs and nearly killed at a ford.
Just a standard Tuesday in Beleriand.
Basically. But the power of the Vala Ulmo, the god of the waters, creates a mist to hide them. And they are rescued by the giant eagles of Thorindor, who carry them over the encircling mountains and drop them directly into the hidden elven city of Gondolin.
Gondolin, the ultimate safe haven. No mortal has ever seen it. And it's ruled by King Turgon, who operates under a mercilessly strict law. Nobody who discovers the city is ever permitted to leave, period.
Right. Turgon's law is a pragmatic defense against Morgoth spies. He can't risk it. But Turgon receives direct counsel from Ulmo to deal kindly with the sons of Hador. So after hosting the brothers for nearly a year, Turgon bends his absolute law.
Which is a huge deal for an elven king.
A massive deal. He allows them to leave, but only after they swear a solemn, binding oath never to reveal the city's location.
And the reasoning Húrin gives Turgon for wanting to leave in the first place is just absolutely gut-wrenching. He basically tells this immortal king, you have the luxury of deep time. You can stay in this perfect city for centuries, waiting for the optimal strategic moment to strike. We cannot.
Right, he says, our time is short, and our hope and strength soon wither.
It is the profound philosophical clash between the immortal and the ephemeral.
The elves endure. Their tragedy is the long, slow fading of the world. It's the sorrow of memory. Men, however, are characterized by a frantic, burning urgency. They know they will die, so they feel this pressing duty to participate in the immediate, desperate struggles of their kin.
They cannot philosophize while their families burn.
Exactly.
Imagine two kids from a war-torn, impoverished neighborhood suddenly swept into a top-secret, technologically perfect utopian sanctuary. They are shown safety, beauty, advanced knowledge. But after a year, they look at each other and say, we have to go back out into the crossfire. Our family is still out there.
Even though returning means almost certain, horrific death.
That is the burden of mortality.
And their presence in Gondolin really highlights the internal fractures among the elves, too. We see significant friction with Maeglin, Turgon's nephew.
Oh, Maeglin, he is not a fan of humans.
Not at all. Maeglin resents the humans intensely. He coldly tells Húrin it would be better if they were forced to stay as servants until they died. Maeglin represents a faction of elves who view men as lesser, fleeting creatures, reckless, unreliable, and biologically inferior.
Which raises a really uncomfortable dynamic.
Yeah.
The elves simultaneously elevate men, calling them elf friends, sharing wisdom, forging alliances, but they also deeply patronize them. They look at them like mayflies.
It is a relationship forged in a crucible of pity, admiration, and just fundamental cosmic misunderstanding.
Right, because they don't get it.
They don't. The elves admire the fierce, brief passion of men, but they are entirely baffled by their susceptibility to disease, to corruption, to aging. They elevate men as younger siblings in the design of the world, but they patronize them because those siblings seem inherently broken by time.
So Húrin and Húr are dropped back home by the eagles in the dead of night. They completely refuse to speak of where they've been. But their father, Galdor, he pieces it together almost instantly.
I mean, you don't survive in the wild for a year and come back wearing pristine elvish clothing.
Exactly. He notes that only Turgon uses the eagles and demands such strict oaths. So the secret holds, but the spiritual weight of that oath is locked in. And their return to the mortal world immediately shatters any peace they found. They plunge right back into the frail reality of their existence.
Which brings us to the core of the familial tragedy. Húrin eventually marries Morwen, and Morwen is a fascinating character. She is from the ruined House of Bir, described as dark-haired, tall, and elven fair, Eletwin.
But her beauty is paired with severe psychological scarring.
Yes. She came to Dor-lómin as an exile following the horrific disaster of the Dagor Bragollach, the Battle of Sudden Flame. She is stern, she's proud, and she is extremely guarded.
She's a stone-cold realist forged in the ashes of defeat. And Húrin is her exact opposite. He's fiery, optimistic, swift of speech.
They're a classic case of opposites attracting.
Totally. They have a son, Túrin, who inherits his mother's dark looks and her serious, brooding mood. And then they have a daughter, Erwin, whom everyone simply calls Lalaith, meaning laughter.
She is golden-haired, joyous, and she is the singular bright spot in this incredibly heavy household.
Until Morgoth exerts his dispersed will. Because he doesn't send an army to attack your house. He manipulates the physical environment. The source text describes an ill wind from the north, coming under leaden skies. It is known as the evil breath.
It's biological warfare.
It's exactly that. It is a pestilence that indiscriminately targets the children and the youth of men. Lilith, at merely 3 years old, catches this dark fever and dies.
And her death is the catalyst that completely calcifies the doom of the House of Niënor. And I think the most revealing aspect of this sequence is the contrasting methodology of grief within the family.
It's so hard to read. Morwen just freezes. The text says she meets her grief in silence and coldness of heart. She doesn't seek comfort, and she absolutely does not offer it.
She just shuts down entirely.
Yeah. She tells her son, Erwin is dead, and laughter is stilled in this house. No embrace, no softening of the blow, just a brutal, factual, stated end to joy.
Meanwhile, Húrin's reaction is an explosive, outward, violent passion. He attempts to play a song of lamentation on his harp, but his rage and sorrow are just so overwhelming that he physically shatters the instrument.
He runs outside, raises his hand toward Angband in the north, and screams a challenge at Morgoth, wishing he could mutilate him face to face.
So you have a mother who turns into a glacier and a father who turns into a volcano.
And caught precisely in the middle is young Túrin. The text notes he weeps bitterly, but only in secret, at night, alone. He never speaks his sister's name to his mother again. You watch his personality harden into concrete in real time.
He internalizes everything.
He internalizes his mother's emotional unavailability and his father's violent, suppressed rage.
It is a devastating portrait of childhood trauma resulting in total emotional isolation. His parents are entirely consumed by their own opposing coping mechanisms. Túrin is left to navigate this immense loss completely unguided.
But before we move on to who Túrin does actually turn to for guidance, I want to unpack a specific quote from Húrin just before Lilith dies. He tells Morwen, "Fair as an elf child is Lilith, but briefer, alas, and so fairer, maybe, or dearer."
That's a beautiful line.
It is, but think about the implications of that. Is mortality the true curse of men, or is their briefness the exact mechanism that makes them capable of such intense, concentrated love?
That observation really touches the very nerve of Tolkien's philosophical divide between the kindreds. For the elves, the world is a long sorrow of memory. But for men, the tragedy is immediate and sharp.
Because it ends so fast.
Right. Húrin is proposing that because Lilith is temporary, the love they feel for her is actually far more potent than the love an elf might feel for an immortal child. The elves have millennia to appreciate a flower, men have only the briefest summer. The scarcity of time amplifies the value of the experience.
Wow. And when that summer ends, the silence is deafening. There's a stream near their house called Niënor, which the girl was named after. And its constant singing water becomes this mocking environmental reminder of the joy that has been permanently deleted from their home.
It's unbearable for Túrin.
So, with his parents emotionally walled off, Túrin seeks out the only person who will actually speak to him, a man named Saedor.
Saedor is an incredibly layered character. He is a house servant, a woodman who accidentally maimed himself with his own axe, causing his leg to shrivel.
Túrin gives him the nickname Labadal, right? Meaning hop a foot.
Yes. And the text explicitly notes that Túrin gives this name in pity, not in scorn, and Saedor accepts it in that spirit. Saedor basically steps into the void left by Húrin and becomes a philosopher peasant for the boy.
He carves little wooden figures of beasts and men for Túrin, and more importantly, he gives him the history his parents won't talk about, because Saedor was a soldier at the Dagor Bragollach.
And he has these profound, weary observations about the world. When Túrin asks him about the greatness of the elves, Saedor doesn't idolize them like Húrin does.
Right. Saedor sighs and says, "In their light we are dimmed, or we burn with too quick a flame, and the weight of our doom lies the heavier on us."
Saedor recognizes the extreme danger of mortals operating in the proximity of immortals. The elves vibrate on a completely different existential frequency.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
When men try to match it, they are either overshadowed, dimmed, or they overextend their natural limits and burn with too quick a flame. Saedor represents the grounded, bleeding reality of the common mortal. He serves as a vital counterweight to Húrin's high-minded, elf-inspired idealism.
Which sets up one of the most psychologically fascinating moments in this early text. It's Túrin's 8th birthday. Húrin gives him an heirloom-quality weapon, a knife with a silver and black hilt forged of elven steel.
A very serious gift.
Very. And Hurriel gives him this intense warning with it. He says, have a care. It is a bitter blade, and steel serves only those that can wield it. It will cut your hand as willingly as aught else.
An incredibly heavy burden to place in the hands of an 8-year-old child who has just lost his sister.
Exactly. Like, happy birthday, here's a razor-sharp magical blade, try not to sever your own arteries. And what does Túrin do? He takes this priceless gift, runs off, and immediately gives it to Sodor. He regifts it.
He does this out of deep pity because he sees Sodor struggling to carve wood with blunt tools.
Right, and when Húrin finds out, Morwen is insulted, assuming Túrin scorns the gift. But Húrin has this surprisingly profound reaction. He tells Morwen, all 3 gifts were your own to give, Túrin. Love, pity, and the nice the least.
It is a remarkable statement on the hierarchy of virtues from a warrior king. Húrin validates his son's agency and generosity. He recognizes that material wealth, even elven steel, is completely secondary to the capacity for empathy.
But, I'm not going to let Túrin off the hook that easily. Let's look at this psychologically. Is Túrin giving the knife away purely a sign of a noble, empathetic future king? Or, look at who he's giving it to, a man who permanently crippled himself with a sharp tool.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Is Túrin subconsciously projecting Sigdor's self-mutilation onto himself? Is he terrified of his father's warning that the blade will cut your hand as willingly as aught else?
So he's getting rid of the danger.
Yes. He is actively avoiding the responsibility of wielding the steel because he is traumatized and deeply afraid of bleeding.
That is a piercing psychological reading. I mean, Túrin has already experienced devastating emotional lacerations. He witnesses the psychological wounds his mother and father carry every single day.
Yeah, exactly.
When handed an instrument whose primary function is to draw blood, a child already suffocating under the weight of grief might intuitively reject the risk. He masks the rejection in an act of profound generosity, but at its very core, it may well be a subconscious evasion of the violent, bloody destiny his father is actively preparing him for.
That makes the regifting infinitely more tragic. It's a boy trying to reject the violent narrative he's been born into. And speaking of inescapable narratives, Sodor drops an observation about human history that is absolutely chilling.
When Túrin asks him about the origins of men.
Yeah, Túrin asks him if men were always afraid, or if they suffer under a specific curse. Sodor admits their deep history is lost, but he speculates on their migration across the mountains. He says, it may be that we fled from the fear of the dark, only to find it here before us, and nowhere else to fly to but the sea.
That single sentence encapsulates the entire existential dread of mortal existence in the First Age.
Nowhere else to fly to.
Right. The Edain migrated westward across the expanse of Middle-earth for generations, seeking the light of the Valar, trying to escape the ancient nameless shadows of the east, only to finally arrive in Beleriand and find Morgoth, the literal architect of the dark, physically entrenched in the north, waiting for them.
It's like running through a burning building just to end up trapped in the furnace room.
There is no sanctuary left. They are backed up against the edge of the world, staring at the ocean.
The ultimate geographical dead end. And while Túrin is absorbing these heavy lessons of fear, pity, and the consequences of sharp steel, his father is gleefully gearing up to walk right into that darkness.
Right, because the year Túrin turns 8, rumors sweep through the land of a massive elf-led offensive to retake the north, the Union of Maedhros.
This is the mobilization for the Nirnaeth Arno Bedad. Húrin prepares to ride out with his men to join the hosts of King Fingon. And Tolkien gives us this masterclass in dramatic irony during the final conversation between Húrin and Morwen before his departure.
Húrin is operating on what I can only describe as toxic martial positivity.
Oh, totally. He is absolutely convinced the Elven coalition is going to permanently crush Morgoth. He tells Morwen they have seen the light in the west, and in the end, darkness must flee from their faces. He is entirely bought into his own mythologized view of Elven invincibility.
Whereas Morwen, burdened by the generational trauma of the ruined House of Buor, is fiercely pragmatic. She does not share his blind faith.
Not for a second.
Internally, she wonders if the Lords of the West have simply abandoned them entirely. She asks the terrifying logical question, how then can even the elder children overcome one of the powers? She understands what Húrin willfully ignores. Morgoth is not just a hostile king, he is a god.
Right. And Húrin, trying to play the responsible commander, tells her that if things do somehow go south, she must flee immediately. He instructs her to go south to Brethil, where his kin live.
But Morwen, aiming for actual security, says she would prefer to seek refuge in Doriath, relying on the magical girdle of Million.
which is a protective barrier of shadow and bewilderment maintained by an angelic being, a genuine sanctuary.
Mm.
But Morwen pushes him on the one place that makes the most sense. She demands to know why he doesn't just send them to Gondolin.
The hidden, impenetrable city where he lived for a year.
Exactly. And Húrin flatly refuses. He states he swore an oath to Turgon, and unless Turgon personally releases him, he will never reveal its location, not even to save his own wife and son from slaughter.
It's a really tough pill to swallow as a modern reader.
It is. I need to challenge this mechanism. Is Húrin's refusal to tell Morwen where Gondolin is a demonstration of pure, unbreakable moral integrity? Or is it just a foolish, rigid adherence to military protocol that fundamentally endangers the very people he is supposed to protect?
To understand Húrin's refusal, we have to look at the theological mechanics of oaths in Tolkien's universe. An oath is not merely a strong promise, it is a spiritual tether. Breaking an oath binds the speaker to absolute inescapable doom. It taints the soul.
Like Niënor and his sons.
Exactly like them. Húrin knows that breaking his oath to Turgon would not just be a betrayal of an ally, it would invite a spiritual corruption upon his house worse than physical death. However, from a purely mortal survivalist perspective, his rigidity is agonizing.
Yeah, it's infuriating.
He is prioritizing his spiritual honor over the practical, immediate safety of his family.
It reminds me of the naive confidence of World War I generals marching their troops off to the trenches, fully assuring everyone they'll be home by Christmas.
Mm.
The imagery of his departure is drenched in this tragic, misplaced glory.
Right, the bright morning.
Yeah, it's a bright morning, the trumpets are blaring, the sun is reflecting off 50 drawn swords. Húrin lifts little Túrin onto his shoulder and shouts to his men, "Let the heir of the house of Hador see the light of your swords!" And the soldiers scream back their battle cry, "Lacho Calad, Drigo Morn, Flame Light, Flee Night."
It is the absolute apex of human valor and blind hope.
And then he rides away. And the camera, so to speak, stays with Morwen and Túrin standing by the doors. Far away, they hear the faint, fading call of a single horn on the wind, and Húrin passes over the shoulder of the hill, never to return.
Never to return to his home.
That single, lonely horn blast completely punctures the loud, glorious pageantry of the departure. It is the sound of an ending.
Because that high hope is marching blindly into a psychological meat grinder. Which brings us to the battle itself. The Nirneath are no Idiad.
Which translates to the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, a historical name that really gives away the ending.
Yeah, it doesn't bode well.
So, it's a midsummer morning. The Elven kings, Maedhros in the east and Fingon in the west, have devised this grand hammer and anvil strategy. Maedhros is supposed to march his forces out openly across the plain to draw Morgoth's main army out of Angband.
And once Morgoth is committed, Fingon will sweep out from his hidden positions in the western hills and crush the orc armies against Maedhros' anvil.
Initially, Fingon's host remains perfectly hidden in the valleys and woods, waiting for Maedhros' signal. The tension of the waiting is palpable, but then an unexpected, massive surge of hope arrives. Unsummoned and unforeseen, King Turgon opens the secret gates of Gondolin.
Yes, he marches out with an army of 10,000 soldiers clad in bright mail. Fingon sees his brother arrive and shouts, "The day has come!" And the hidden army answers, "The night is passing."
The morale is absolute. The trap is set perfectly. But this is where we have to remember the mechanics of Morgoth's curse. Morgoth doesn't just fight with steel, he fights with the mind.
He espies everywhere.
Exactly. He knows their entire strategy. He knows Maedhros has been delayed in the east, so Morgoth sends out a decoy army against Fingon in the west. But this army is clad entirely in dun-colored raiment. They show no naked steel. They literally camouflage themselves against the dusty, ash-covered plain of the Anfoglyph.
It is a tactical provocation. Morgoth's captain is under strict orders to draw Fingon's army out of the defensive hills prematurely. This would effectively ruin the hammer and anvil timing before Maedhros can even arrive.
But Fingon is an experienced commander. He holds his ground, he refuses the bait, maintaining the integrity of the trap.
Which forces Morgoth's hand.
Right. So when conventional military tactics and camouflage fail, Morgoth resorts to sheer, unadulterated psychological torture. His forces march right up to the outermost defenses of the Elven lines. His heralds ride forward, and they drag out a prisoner.
An elf named Gelmir. He was a lord of Nargothrond who had been captured years prior in the Brugaloch and blinded.
And in full, agonizing view of the Elvish front lines, Morgoth's heralds brutally dismember Gelmir. They hew off his arms and his legs, leaving his torso on the ash, and they shout a terrifying promise, that they will do the exact same to every single soldier waiting in those hills.
So horrific.
It's so brutal. And here is the horrific, hyper-specific twist of fate. Stationed right there, directly on the front lines, staring out at this mutilation, is Gelmir's own brother, Gwyndor.
Oh, it's just, you can't even imagine.
Gwyndor is instantly consumed by an absolute blinding cocktail of grief, horror, and wrath. He leaps onto his horse and charges alone into the decoy army. And that single, emotionally shattered charge acts as a spark in a powder keg.
It completely ignites the entire Noldor host. The discipline breaks instantly. They pour out of the hills in a frenzy of blind, uncontrollable rage.
Visual description Tolkien provides is a masterclass in momentum. He says, the light of the drawing of the swords of the Noldor was like a fire in a field of reeds.
It is so fast, so utterly furious, and so fueled by the righteous anger of thousands of elves that it actually sweeps the decoy army away entirely. They slaughter their way across the plain and almost derail Morgoth's master plan by sheer force of wrath.
They actually reach the very doors of Angband, hammering on the gates.
But they are hammering on the gates of hell because it was exactly what the devil wanted.
Right. Morgoth didn't outmuscle them. He didn't out-strategize them with superior troops. He weaponized their own empathy against them.
That is the cruelest part.
Think about the philosophical horror of this.
Yeah.
Is this the ultimate proof of how Morgoth's curse actually functions? That the very things that make the good guys good brotherly love, righteous anger, empathy, the inability to watch a brother be tortured, are the exact levers Morgoth pulls to obliterate them.
That is the defining mechanism of the First Age. Morgoth is incapable of creating true love or loyalty. He can only corrupt it.
Because he has none himself.
Precisely. By orchestrating a scenario where Gwyndor's profound love for his brother forces him into a suicidal tactical blunder, Morgoth proves that in a corrupted world, virtue itself is a fatal vulnerability. The battle of unnumbered tears is lost the very millisecond Gwyndor rides out. Not because Gwyndor is weak, but because his capacity for love is exploited by a god who feels none.
And that impulsive, love-driven charge traps the entire Western host, including Húrin and his men, in the meat grinder of the Anfalglith. The battle shifts, the betrayal of men from the east occurs, and the Grand Alliance is dismantled piece by piece.
It all just falls apart.
Which leaves us staring at the precipice of ruin. We've dissected how this grand cosmic chess match between a physically bleeding, cowardly god and the immortal, fading elves deeply and permanently, scars the mortal humans who are used as pawns on the board. The House of Hador is about to be utterly dismantled, and the psychological architecture of Túrin's incredibly dark fate is fully constructed.
It is a devastating, meticulous setup. The context we've explored today, the doomed geography of Beleriand, the localized gravitational pull of Morgoth's malice, the crushing burden of mortal brevity, and the weaponization of virtue. It frames every single decision Túrin will ever make.
Exactly. Every terrible choice Túrin makes later in his life was forged in the silence of his mother, the shattered harp of his father, and the blood of the Niënor. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Something that builds on everything we've just discussed about the mechanics of this world.
Okay, let's hear it.
Earlier, we noted that Morgoth dispersed his own power into his evil creations, right? Pouring his essence into the orcs, the dragons, and even manipulating the weather, like the pestilent evil breath that targeted the children and killed little Lilith.
Right. He fundamentally disseminated his spiritual essence into the physical matter of the world to exert control.
Right. So if Morgoth's essence is literally seeped into the very soil, the weather, the atmosphere, and the creatures of Beleriand, doesn't that mean Middle-earth itself is essentially Morgoth's version of the One Ring?
Wow. That is wow.
And if that's true, if the very air they breathe is laced with his malice, does that mean that for Túrin, Morwen, and Húrin, true free will is biologically and geographically impossible? Because they aren't just fighting a Dark Lord, they are walking, breathing, and trying to love inside the physical manifestation of the devil's own mind.
It really reframes the entire struggle. I mean, if the earth itself is the ring, then every step Túrin takes is a step upon the will of his enemy.
A staggering thought to take with you. At the start of this deep dive, I told you to abandon the expectation of a comfortable fantasy. You are now standing in a landscape that is suffocating, murky, and actively hostile to love. You know why the air is so hard to breathe? You're not just reading a history of the Elder Days. You are trapped inside the atmosphere of a curse. Finding your way through that dark atmospheric pressure alongside Túrin is the true journey of the Children of Húrin. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep challenging the text, and we'll see you in the shadows next time.